Welcome back to my channel, Tech Tutor. Last time we talked about Java variables, and if you missed that video, please check out the link in the description. Today we will talk about Java conditionals and why you might want to use them. So as an example, in the bank application that we're creating, you might want to add rules to avoid invalid input or to see if the overdraft protection is on, or other rules that might exist in your bank application. So today, let's get started for this video with if statements. In an if statement, the code inside of the if will only execute if it evaluates to true. So if you are using a Boolean value, like we had in our previous video, that could be set to true, you would always enter the if statement if it was true. Alternatively, you can provide Boolean operators that are calculated to true or false depending on the operator. Here are some examples that you might see. So if you have an integer a that is set to 3, and an integer b that is set to 8, and a Boolean result, well, if you set the result equal to a is less than b, that's a less than operator, then it would be true because 3 is less than 8. A is greater than b, which is the next one, is false because 3 is not greater than 8. Next, that is less than or equal to. So a is less than or equal to 3. That is true because it is equal to 3. B is greater than or equal to 9. That is false because a is not equal to 9 or greater than 9. You also can have an operator to see if the two are equal. So a equals to b is also false because 3 is not equal to 8. You can also add an exclamation point in front of an equal sign, and this means not equal because the exclamation point stands for not operator. So a is not equal to b is true because 3 is not equal to 8. In the next one, you have what is called an OR operator. So first, a is greater than b, and then you have the two lines, vertical lines. That is your OR operator. So OR, a is less than b. This ends up being true because a is less than b. So the first one is false or true. And whenever you have an OR, as long as one of them is true, the whole entire statement is true. For the next one, you have an AND operator. And so 2 is less than a is true, and a is less than 6, that is also true. So only if both are true in an AND operator will you get a true logical response. For the last one, you can opposite a Boolean with a not operator. As I mentioned earlier, an exclamation point is considered a not operator. So you can take the opposite result of the Boolean value. So if the result was set to true, which let's say it was set to true in the previous line from our AND operator of 2 less than a and a is less than 6, well then the opposite of that would be false. So that is why the result of not result is false. Next, if you want to add these operators into if statements, you would see something like this. And you'd want to use if statements if you're trying to branch off two different types of logic, or you can even nest it with other if statements, which we'll get into in a minute. But the simple if-else statement says if, in this case, a is equals to b, which is not, but if it was, it would enter that part of code between these two curly braces. Otherwise, else covers every other scenario, so that would mean it will go between the two curly braces of the else statement and execute any code between those curly braces. The else statement is optional, so you could just have if a is equal to b and then execute some logic between the curly braces. Otherwise, it could just skip that logic and do nothing else. Additionally, the if-else statement, as I mentioned earlier, would look something like this. You could say if a is equal to b, which it's not, so it'll move on. Otherwise, what it will do in these if-else statements is go into one branch of logic and then exit the entire if-else. So since it's not, it goes to the next one. So else if A is less than B, which it is because 3 is less than 8, it would execute some logic here. As it's mentioned here in what is called the comments, I don't think I've talked about this yet, but if you put 2 slashes, backslashes, and then some words after that, that is just what will appear as a comment. It will not be executed as code. Basically, programmers will put comments in to help explain what their code is doing. So, as you can see from the comment, never reached this point is the comment for the else statement because A was less than B, and so it executed whatever code was between those curly braces and then exited the if statement. Another statement you might see is called the switch statement, which looks for case values to match the input value. A switch statement works with the byte, short, char, and int primitive data types. It also works with enumerated types, the string class, and a few other special classes that wrap primitive types such as character, byte, short, and integer. For simplicity, here is a simple example using an integer input and month values. Each break statement will execute the code before the break, and then when it hits the break, it will exit the switch statement. Here is an example of a switch statement with break statements. So it sets the int value of month to 8. It is looking to set a string of month string. So it's going to enter the switch statement with the integer value of 8. As you can see all of the cases here, there's 1 through 12 and then a default case. So it will go down to case 8 and it will set the month string equal to August. And then because there is a break right after that, it will not execute any other cases and will exit the switch statement. If it did not find any matches, it would have gone down to the default case and set the month string to invalid month. Now, to elaborate more on what happens when you don't put break statements between the cases, if you need to execute logic where multiple actions are expected, you can selectively place your break statements to group conditions like this. So if we had a list of strings and these were called future months, you could input the month of 8 as the integer again, and then it would jump down to the case 8, and it will add August to that month list. But because you don't have a break inside of that case statement, it'll continue to execute the other cases that follow after 8. So it is going to go to case 9 now, and add September, then add October, then November, and then December. And then now you see there is a break at case 12, so it will exit the switch statement here. And then we have a little bit of extra logic just to show what kind of code you could add after this point to see what you have. So you could have an if statement that says, oh, is my list empty? If it's empty, then I must have received an invalid month number. Else, if I did not receive an invalid month number, then I want to iterate through the list. And we can elaborate on list and what we're doing here, but just for simplicity, let's just walk the rest of this example out. So you can iterate through that future months list and start printing the names to the screen. And then what you would have seen is that you would have August, September, October, November, and December. So now let's jump over to the code, and we're going to add some conditions to our code to prepare us further for our bank application. Now that we've learned about if statements and switch statements, let's add a switch statement to take in a command. Before we add a scanner for our input, let's add a few system messages to help guide our user towards valid input. So we'll go ahead and add another system.out.println, and this message will say, what would you like to do today? Then we'll go ahead and add another line, system.out.println, and then this will say, your first option, 1, is deposit. And then we'll go ahead and just copy this for simplicity and paste, and we'll edit it. So your second command will be withdraw. Now let's add the scanner to take in our command. So it will be scanner, and we'll name the variable command equals new scanner. And we're going to use system input to populate the scanner, so system.in, add a semicolon at the end. And now we need to store the value of the command. So we'll read that into an integer because that is what we're going to use in our switch statement. So we'll create an int command value equals, and then command dot next int, because that's how you're pulling the value out of the scanner. And now we will create a switch statement. So just like in our intro in the video where we started talking about switch statements, you will now say switch. You're going to have the command value here. You need a curly brace. It'll automatically add the closing curly brace after you push enter. And now let's start setting up our cases. So we've planned to have two valid cases, one which is deposit and two which is withdrawal. So let's go ahead and set up our first case, and we'll say 1 with a colon, and this is where you will add your deposit logic. So let's just go ahead and set more of a placeholder for it. So we'll push enter, and then we'll have a break, and then we'll populate our logic in just a moment. But the break will execute only case 1, and then it will exit the switch statement. We do that so we don't end up executing our other cases unintentionally. So our next case will be case 2, same thing, add a break statement. So this will be for our withdrawal logic. And lastly, we'll have a default case. This is when the user enters any input that's not valid. We want it to tell them that it was an invalid command. So let's go ahead and add that logic now. So we'll say system.out.println the command provided was invalid. So it'll tell them that they entered a command that is not valid. And then we'll add, lastly, a break to exit the switch statement. Now let's go ahead and populate our deposit logic. So we can actually kind of borrow some of the code we already had. So let's go ahead and take this message of how much would you like to deposit up here. Go ahead and cut that out, and we'll put it in case 1. So we're going to end up scanning for another value because now you need to know how much they would like to deposit. We already have the deposit amount here. We'll still print this out just to help us follow along with what was entered. And then what we'll need to do is we'll need to update their balance as well. So we will say balance equals balance plus that deposit amount. And so that updates their balance to the new value that has been added to it, which is the deposit amount the user has entered. We should probably add another value in here to prevent them from putting invalid input, because if they put a negative amount, that would be invalid. So let's also go ahead and add our first if statement. So our first if statement would be, after this deposit amount, we'll say if deposit amount is less than 0, then we're going to tell them that they've added an invalid amount by saying your deposit amount must be greater than 0. And then to prevent the logic that adds it to the balance, we'll go ahead and put the break here, which will break out of the switch statement. Next, let's handle the withdrawal amount. So for the withdrawal amount, we are going to have to create a new set of logic. We didn't actually have anything for withdrawal before, so let's go ahead and kind of borrow what we had above, and we'll modify it just for saving time. So how much would you, instead of with deposit, it'll be withdrawal. And then we'll change this to withdrawal input. So we'll take that next double, and we'll call it withdrawal amount. And then the same thing is going to apply. We can't have them putting negative values, so we're going to say the withdrawal amount must also not be less than 0. So if it is less than 0, you'll say your withdrawal amount must be greater than 0. And this also allows them to put 0. So actually we should probably say if it's less than or equal to 0, because really it doesn't make sense for them to be putting 0 in here either. So we'll do that above. So we'll say that both of these are now that if it's less than or equal to 0, that it would fail. And in fact, our print statement actually does cover this. We just needed to fix that if conditional. All right, and if they withdraw an amount that is greater than 0, it's valid. So let's add an else if here though. If they have withdrawn an amount that is greater than their current balance, and then let's add another part of the conditionals we learned, which is how we can add the and operator. And overdraft protection, if that was enabled, then it would stop this from happening. And we would say another message, you cannot withdraw an amount greater than your balance. So the overdraft protection has stopped them from withdrawing an amount greater than their balance. Finally, we'll add another else, which will be if the withdrawal amount is greater than the balance, but the overdraft protection is not on, we will allow it to happen. And or even if the withdrawal amount is not greater than the balance, it doesn't matter. All those cases will be handled in this else. So we'll just go ahead and say that their balance equals the balance minus the withdrawal amount. And now we've updated the balance. In fact, let's add one more command that allows them to also see what their new balance is. So we will say that a third command up here is get balance. And then we'll add one more case, which is the third case. And we will say system.out.println, and then your balance is. We'll have a plus to concatenate the implicit string here with our string balance value. Now, our balance is actually a double, but really it will convert to a string when you've concatenated it with this string. So it'll print out your balance is plus the value of the double balance. And then we will break. So that way we do not go to the default logic of the switch statement. So now we have the logic that initializes our balance to 15 cents. We say what it is in the beginning just for tracking purposes. We've enabled overdraft protection. We're also telling ourselves what that is in the console. We can remove these later if we like, but this just helps us see what's going on. We're going to print what would you like to do today and give them 3 options to choose from. We're going to read in that command into the scanner, get the value from the scanner, and then enter our switch statement. And in our switch statement, we have 3 main cases and a default case. And then we also utilized just an if statement, and then another if statement where we have if else's and a final else. And then we also view our balance here. Now the thing is here is that we can't actually change our balance without looping through and taking in another command. So we'll visit that in a future video where we will actually loop here until the user exits our system. So that way, if they add money to their balance or if they withdraw, then we would end up seeing a updated balance. But for now, let's just go ahead and run this and just validate that it can take commands and that we are on our way towards our final bank application. So right click and click run. And now you're seeing the messages that I talked about. My balance is 15 cents. The overdraft protection is true. And then what would you like to do today? Deposit, withdraw, or get balance. So let's just say deposit is 1 And then let's go ahead and test our if statement. So we'll say -1, and it says your deposit amount must be greater than 0. So we'll go ahead and run that one more time. We'll also check our withdrawal command. How much would you like to withdraw? We'll put an amount that is greater than our balance. So we'll put 2 and overdraft protection is on. Says you cannot withdraw an amount greater than your balance. Lastly, let's check our other 2 cases. Click run. We'll say we want to get balance. We see that our balance is 15 cents. And for the final catch of if any invalid input is added, we'll say 4 because 4 is not a valid command. And you'll see the command provided was invalid. Thanks for watching this tutorial on Java conditionals. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments. If you liked this video, please click the like button and be sure to subscribe for future content. Next time we will talk about Java loops, which we will use in order to continue to take additional user input before exiting our application. Thanks for watching and be sure to check out the next video coming soon.